Hi everyone, welcome to today. Today we're going to talk about millennials dating crisis, and I am super excited about this topic. I am very passionate about it. I wrote a book on millennials dating, a modern guide to finding love, and I'll be touching on aspects of the book today. It is available on Amazon Kindle, and so I'll put more information down in the description. So also be on the lookout for a promotion. In about 2 weeks or so, I'll be running a book promotion on that. So if you're interested in this topic, please don't miss that. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So I think the first thing that has significantly put millennials in a dating crisis is how the landscape has changed. You know, we know that the Me Too movement has significantly shifted the landscape in how relationships and have impacted relationships. So let's look at those two things. Number one, for women, the Me Too movement has given women so much. So we see that the landscape has shifted significantly. The Me Too movement has impacted relationships. On the one hand, for women, we see that women are setting firmer boundaries in their relationships, becoming much more assertive, and wanting a deeper respect within their relationships. So we see already for women that has already happened. For men, on the other hand, it's the change has been on this kind of two responses. On the one hand, men have welcomed the change, they have embraced it, they have recognized that, you know, it's time for them to look at what does it mean to be a man, masculinity, what does that entail? And for many men, they have found that it's given them an opportunity to touch and delve into their emotional intelligence, just giving voice to the emotions and starting to be more outspoken about where they are emotionally. And it's something that men have not gone there in the past very much, and I think that seems to be emerging, where some men are saying, you know what, I need to take better care of myself emotionally, just physically. I need to take care of my grooming, how I look, how I present myself to the world, and then also my living space. How do I navigate my living space? I need to make it a home that I can feel it is a home. So for me, that's exciting. I've seen some trends on TikTok where some young men are just taking the challenge and the initiative just to be so much more creative and taking their own lives much more into consideration, and also just running with embracing what it means to be this new masculinity. On the other hand, we find that there's a lot of men that are struggling and they're just lost. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to say. They don't know where to go, what to say, and what the next steps need to be. And so in the book, I do unpack that quite a bit. So and so I'm just going to leave it at that for now. But just looking at how masculinity has come and has played into the dating crisis. Secondly, for women, they are women are facing a biological clock that's ticking away, and so that is causing a lot of pressure for women to move forward in their relationships. The the next area is just finding, are you relationship ready? And that is a crisis, because as a millennial, you have now lived in long enough. You've either had past relationships, or you've come from a family where there might have been some trauma, and so how have you dealt with your emotional baggage? We all have emotional baggage, and so the question isn't do you have, the question is have you dealt with. And so I do go into quite a bit of getting yourself relationship ready. Means, number one, it means that you need to have dealt with your emotional baggage, and have dealt with that rejection that was so hard for you. Do you know yourself? What do people say about you when people talk about you? Do they talk about, what are the kinds of things that people say about you? That will help you to see kind of how people perceive you. And then, do you know what your temperament is? Are you a very patient person, very caring, very loving, or are you the kind of person that is just, very quick, responsive, short? What are those responses, and just helps you to understand who you are. Do you know what are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Or are you kind of in between? And I go into a little bit more into detail around all that. Extroversion, introversion, and then what we call the ambivert, which is kind of in that middle piece, and help you to recognize the tools that you need to in order to move forward. Then, do you know what your love language is? How do you respond, and how do you expect people to respond to you? And so I go into the 5 stages of the love languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. And so just, expand on that a little bit more. Then, very importantly, I talk about the heavy burden of finances that millennials are carrying in terms of student debt, and what that means, and how that interplays with relationships. We know that there are 2 very strong pillars in relationships, and that is, number 1, it's finance, and number 2, it's intimacy. And these 2 very powerful play into each other. And so what to be aware of, how are you communicating these different needs, important needs, how are you communicating that? And just start to just kind of just debunking that level of responsibility that people feel that they need to have it all sorted out before moving on to the next stage of life. I talk about how, for myself, you never have enough money to get married, you never have enough money to buy a house, you never have enough money to have a child. These are just things that life sorts out as you go along. You figure things out as you go along. And I find that it's just this burden that a lot of millennials are carrying in this regard. Then I also go on to talk about what are those other areas. As we are learning more about ourselves, things like neurodivergence. I talk about, are you diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, learning difficulty? Are you sitting on the autism spectrum? And I think that, what is great about today is that there's more information about it, and how it impacts relationships. And so I have a whole chapter talking about, what are the things that you can do if it's one of you, if it's both of you, and how do you navigate through a relationship. Those are very exciting things that people are much more open about today, and being able to understand how to navigate through difficulties in their relationships, and how to overcome barriers and challenges. I talk about people pleasers. People pleasing is super important. I have a previous video on talking about setting boundaries, and so there's a couple of very specific for millennials. Mama drama, I go into what mama drama is all about. When you have friends that surround you and you always finding that you're the one that is compromising all the time, you can't say no, you just always being pulled from one side to the other. And so just looking at those boundary setting again, and how important that is for you to move forward. Very important is, of course, the new area of relationships where there's a lot of growth. In America, it's showing 1 in 6 relationships are multicultural or cross-cultural. So looking at, including race, ethnicity, culture, all of these different aspects that millennials are now moving into. And I think that there's a lot there, to expand on. I've got a chapter on that as we move towards these cross-cultural relationships, and what are the things that we need to be on the lookout for. And then, of course, we cannot go without talking about toxic relationships. Unfortunately, it is part and parcel of the dating life, and so I do go into that quite a bit. I have 3 chapters on that. Number 1, narcissism. I talk about narcissism, what to look out for, how do you find what to do when you find yourself in a narcissistic relationship. Similarly, intimate partner violence, and I talk about coercive control. Now, all 3 of them have a lot of similarities. They are slightly one different from the other, some more dangerous than the other, but all of them kind of have one thing in common, and that is the beginning. And the beginning of these relationships it always starts with what we call kind of love bombing, that you just showered with so much affection and what you think is love, and you think this person is just head over heels in love with you, and only to find as things continue that you start to feel that, hey, all of a sudden, as time goes on, you don't have friends, you don't have family around anymore that care about you, and you kind of find that you've been isolated more and more and more. And if you find yourself in that situation where you're starting to feel something isn't right, I talk about following your gut. And I do provide lots of steps in order to what to do as next steps should you find yourself in a toxic relationship. So this is just a quick overview highlight on millennials dating crisis. Please look out for more information in the next 2 weeks as I do the book promotion, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.